Greetings to the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and welcome to our community. I am April Briscoe, your co-chair of the Physical and Mental Health Committee, and we thank you for joining us to discuss the importance of Black mental health. I have the pleasure this evening of introducing a friend, Kevinton Overton Hatnot, licensed professional counselor associate and co-founder and founder of Counseling for Us. Kevin Overton Hadnot is a native of Austin, Texas. He earned his Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration in 2009 from Stillman College. Following Stillman, he entered the graduate program of Concordia University, Texas in Austin, Texas, where he received his Master's of Business Administration and Organizational Leadership in Management. He also completed his Master of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling at Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas, and is a licensed professional counselor associate. He remains in Austin and has been working for the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services Prevention and Early Intervention Division. He has been an employee with the state of Texas for over 10 years and currently works as the Director of Contract Management and Oversight at PEI. He is also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity since 2008. He opened his private practice, Counseling for Us, a counseling and consulting practice. His goal is to be the beacon of hope to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and offer culturally competent care in the field of child abuse and build upon his experience working with adolescents with disabilities and high adverse childhood experience scores. He believes there is a hope and healing for everyone. In his free time, he loves to work out, read books, and spend time with his dog, Kobe. He is supervised by Maria Reyna, licensed professional counselor, supervisor. Please join me in welcoming Kevinton Overton Hatnot, founder of Counseling for Us.
Thank you so much. And you say my name very, very proper. I love it. Kevinton Overton. It's Kevin Overton Hannah, but I love the Kevinton Overton Hannah. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. First, I'm honored to be joined to join you all tonight and to join on the Austin Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Let me just begin. I know we're kind of already into the 7 o'clock hour, but just to say a quick kudos to all of the work that your sorority has been doing in the community. I remember my time as the Pole Mark here in Austin, and just even then working alongside of you all, and just seeing the diligence and the patience and like the dedication that you have given, and the service that you have given to our community. So just kudos to you all, and all the best to all that you all continue to do and will do as well. Let me keep us going. So just a quick note about me, when I reflect on my own journey, growing up here in Austin, Texas, I received my own mandated counseling. So it's kind of like full circle that I would now be in the counselor seat. Aside from that, just growing up in the church, but also witnessing like many church members who would lose hope, although we kind of would like be posing as Christians, and that's not being petty, that's just being curious and just mindful about the situation, but also encountering others and other men who I feel like could benefit from counseling, but wouldn't go because maybe the lack of trust or or whatever their concern would be. I feel like I'm really passionate about reaching as many Black men as possible, to support them on their healing journey. And I think that's a place to even pause to say, I really want to begin this conversation by affirming and also challenging this thought. So if you join by way of the flyer, you notice that maybe it mentioned that today women have taken a front seat when it comes to our physical and mental health, when it comes to our family's health care. And so just in that spirit, then my conversation blended with my passion is going to be, how do we then work to support the men in our lives, whether it's your husband or your sons, our brothers, our fathers, our uncles or cousins, and work through some of those challenges. And so I think this means that I'll be talking to both men and women essentially, right? And so and just to even use this platform, we know behind every um, good man, there's a successful Delta somewhere as well. So talking to the Deltas too tonight as well. So again, grateful for this conversation. But a place to just be mindful of, in our culture, men have not been taught or even given the space to process and talk about our emotional experiences. And we see that come up a lot, especially in some of the sessions that I'm sitting in with some of my clients. And I think this has, which is really given like the passion behind this conversation tonight. I think this has sort of been fostered a sense of isolation. It's fostered a sense of anger and resentment, and like for these men, like emotional validity can sort of result sometimes manifesting in us. I'm using myself as well because I'm a wounded healer, if you will. It manifests as us like shutting down in relationships, in our friendships. Sometimes we may stonewall often, right? And so at its worst, it may also have budding resentment, and I think that can even develop into more of like this outward aggression of violence. And I think again, I guess because of this, and because of all the ways we may show up or intersect with different people or experiences, I think this is just a conversation. This conversation around men's mental health is like more of an intrapersonal, more of like an inner thing where we have to work on it ourselves, and also interpersonal where we sort of build this dynamic between others, our families, and our relatives as well, and kind of give it more of an all hands on deck conversation. So, I mean, this conversation tonight is not going to be just about, hey, men, go get a spa day, which I am an advocate for. But it's also going to be more about even why we need to even, like, I guess, why we even need to have a space where we need a spa day and kind of go a little bit more upstream. And to that point, it was Desmond Tutu who said, there comes a point, right, where we need to stop pulling people out of the river. And it's not that, of course, if they're in crisis, we want to pull them out as fast as we possibly can and work with them on the spot. But we got to start going upstream with our men, with each other, and figure out what's causing some of the concerns, some of the stresses, and begin to work at that angle and at that point of the river, if you want to use that analogy. And I think in the counseling terms, even for men, I mean, we think about this when I work with maybe domestic violence clients, or people who deal with severe or significant violence. But even for just men, as a general question, like what happened to you? Not what's wrong with you, or go seek counseling, or you're getting on my nerves, get out of here. But what happened to you? You have a story. You didn't just start showing up this way, stonewalling overnight, or working through, or being quiet, or being aggressive overnight, right? And again, not giving credence and like um and making excuses for behaviors, but just sort of just, even at the beginning of this conversation, just noting that it's going to take a little bit of rewiring. Just even with when we're working with our Black men like me, what happened to you? You have a story. I want to be more empathetic and listen to you and try to meet you where you are um, in your journey. And so again, I use this word tonight about what happened to you, because I hope tonight that we can really begin to rewire around Black men's mental health and really learn more upstream ways to reduce the stigma and then ultimately embed more self-care. So I want to quickly spend our time kind of just talking a little bit more about why mental health is important, how we can really work on reducing the stigma, why the stigma is even why it even exists, recognize some of the real stuff, some of the real stressors that we may face, or even I think I labeled the slide more like things that we should consider while we're interacting or engaging with one another as Black men, or just those who are also just kind of a part of our lives. And then, excuse me, the importance of remembering self care, and to discuss how we can really take care of ourselves. And that's going to be a place where I not only talk to men, but also talk to women as well. So my first poll, if I can get the first poll out, we have a few people on. I want to just kind of pick your brain, just as we come into this conversation about mental health. If this is a question that I just kind of want to just do as a baseline to see sort of who's all in the room. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your own mental health? Everyone can answer. We want to make sure we get 100% participation. So let's take the poll. We'll keep it open for a few seconds, and we'll come in and see kind of what the results were. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your own mental health? And there's no right or wrong answers to this question. And we'll leave it up for maybe another 30 more seconds. How would you rate your own mental health? All right, our results are coming in. Okay, we have a 1 tonight. Okay, we have a 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, we have 4. I see some 6s. About 5 of you said maybe it's a 6 tonight. Are there more? Let me see. Oh, I have to keep scrolling. Okay, we have a 7. We have 9 of us said 7. 8 of us, 6 of us said we're about an 8 tonight. A 9. We didn't have any 10s. Okay. Okay, and that wasn't a trick question. Thank you all for answering. Um, I just want to kind of that was more of like an icebreaker, honestly, just to kind of see who all was in the room. I feel like it was helpful to know how we were all showing up, but just really based on kind of our own sense or rating scale, if you will. Um, so thank you all for participating in that. All right, let me stop. All right, there you go. All right. So I'm gonna play a quick video, and this is I was gonna say my friend Trevor Noah, but he's not my friend, but maybe my Eve friend from afar. But I want to play this video from Trevor Noah when obviously Trevor Noah was on the Daily Show, and I think he does a really good job of the way I want to call it, like helping us open up some neural pathways as it relates to receiving information around Black mental health. Of course, he's a comedian, and this is not like a laughing matter, but I think he just has an easier way to kind of help us tiptoe into the ocean of this conversation for this evening. So I'll play this about 4-minute video, and then I'll come back on.
There are few groups who could stand to benefit from therapy more than Black people. I mean, think about all the things Black people have been through: slavery, segregation, winter, all equally traumatic experiences. But unfortunately, even as therapy has become more mainstream, the Black community has had a tough time getting the help that they need.
It's hard enough to get mental health treatment in the U.S., but studies show that racial and ethnic minorities are significantly less likely to receive mental health treatment than whites.
Black and Hispanic children are less likely to get mental health care than white kids. And studies show that irritability in the average white teenager is often labeled as depression. That same behavior is more likely to be seen as disruptive in Black or Latino children, and doctors say that can lead to feelings of hopelessness at a very young age.
Yes, one of the reasons many Black people don't get the proper treatment is misdiagnosis. What is seen as depression in white people can be seen as disruptive behavior in Black people. And this shouldn't be surprising, right? This kind of thing happens in medicine all the time, mixed diagnoses. It's like when a Black person has a seizure, it's a medical emergency. But when a white person does it, it's called dancing. But it turns out, even when Black people are properly diagnosed with mental health issues, it can still be a challenge to find a therapist who's equipped to handle their needs.
Making the crisis worse, not enough African American therapists. Today, only 4% of psychologists are Black.
Kevin Durden says admitting he needed help was actually easier than finding it. He saw 3 different therapists, but felt that none of them understood the stress and emotions unique to Black men.
When Taraji P. Henson's own son, Marcel, was struggling, she found it nearly impossible to find him one.
Trying to find a culturally competent therapist was like looking for a purple unicorn with a gold horn.
Do they understand the cultural context from which I'm coming from? Do they understand the culture that I live in?
That's right. It's extremely difficult for Black people to find a Black therapist. And it's been like this for a very, very long time. I mean, that's why Martin Luther King Jr. was always describing his dreams to huge crowds. You know, it's just like, I had another dream that I'm being chased by bears in my underwear. Does anyone here know what that means? Now you may think that a therapist's race shouldn't matter at all. And that's true. But if you think about it, it does make sense. For many white therapists, no matter how good they are, it can be hard to understand the particular experiences of a Black person. You know, just sitting there in a session, even if they're trying, it could be like, so you say people are following you around the store and you're invisible, but only to taxi drivers? Paranoid delusions. So when it comes to mental health, there's a very real struggle for Black people to access healthcare, get diagnosed correctly, and find a therapist who can relate to them. But if that wasn't bad enough, there's another major hurdle stopping Black people from getting therapy, and it comes from the Black community itself.
We have a stigma in the Black community when it comes to dealing with mental health.
Black students say where they come from, it's shameful to talk about anxiety, depression, and trauma.
It's not okay to have mental health issues, or like that's a white people thing.
I've heard all the time, Black men don't go to therapy, they go to the barbershop.
I told my own mother that I was seeing a therapist, and she said, you don't need to see a therapist. What you need to do is see a preacher.
You got Jesus.
Right.
You don't need anything else,
Right.
you know, just buck it up.
Ah, yeah. That's a line every Black person knows all too well. You don't need therapy, you need Jesus. And my response is always, why can't we use both? Because church is a great place for community, but therapy is great for one-on-one mental health needs. I mean, I bet Jesus.
So hopefully that was helpful. I kind of want to spend another 2 more seconds kind of picking your brain. So if you can kind of throw in the chat, what is 1 or 2 thoughts that come up for you as you heard Trevor Noah talk about mental health in this way, and sort of that, and some of them maybe the nuggets essentially. I mean, he has a palatable way to approach conversations when we're trying to, I mean, even the serious conversations. So maybe just really quickly, if you all can just maybe put in the chat, what is 1 or 2 takeaways that you heard from Trevor Noah? And I'll come back on kind of from my notes, and I'll keep us going. So what came up for you during the video? I have a hand raised. Okay. Ms. Joan.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I was just going to say one thing that for me is that Black people don't go to therapists.
Yeah. Black people, I heard that loud. I heard that loud and clear. I see that in my practice, and this even like even some of the men that I have come into my sessions, like their first time, they're like, "Whoa, bro! Like I'm not comfortable talking about these things," and so we have to kind of make it, build rapport and kind of like take it slow, of course. But yeah, I hear that loud and clear. So thank you for raising that. In the chat, I'm hearing, those cliches hit home. Yes, I was like, ooh, you're going deep. You're joking about it, but you're going deep. The depth of the problem. He had a national platform. Yes. The systemic hurdles that getting help difficult. Yes. And I love Yvette saying it is okay to seek therapy. Yes, thank you. Now, when people people of color ask for help, we have a hard time getting true help. Absolutely, because others in the community shame us. And I will also add, I heard him say, which I was going to mention, that even we perpetuate that as well. So I don't want to just only blame others in the community or others outside of our community, but even us within our community, we sort of shame each other. So I think that's kind of what you were saying. But if not, I would add to that. And we culturally dismiss. I see Fowler. We culturally dismiss the need for therapy. Yes, we need to realize and understand that therapy is needed, and it is okay for us to. I see someone says like their nephew's current status and his father is not telling the family. The stigma is real. I can also add that everyone isn't always. I think sometimes even within that stigma, people feel like that maybe people can't help them correctly, but also at the same time, people just may not be ready to tell people, or may not even have the words to tell people. And also, so there's a lot of communication expectation is there as well. So I firmly agree there. The stigma is real. You understand what they're saying. So yeah, I agree. I thank you all for sharing all of these things. I'm going to keep jumping. Black men see admitting to having mental health issues as a weakness. Yes. I hear that a lot. And culturally competent, of course. Even with my own counselor, I can just say, "Hey, bro, I watched Power today," and just as a general conversation, and he gets it. I don't have to explain. Oh, what is Power? We can talk about it and talk about just different things that come up for us. So yes, all of these are true and real. And thank you all for for jumping in. Just really quick, I think for me, one thing I picked up as becoming a counselor that was so real for me is this misdiagnosis, and I think the mislabeling. Because I think you're right. Not that we invalidate those who may have schizophrenia, which I think it definitely shows up a lot in our community. But even like the paranoia factor can be one piece of it. But just even knowing that we sometimes as black people do get so followed around stores, so that's a real thing, right? And so just wanted to name that misdiagnosis can be a major mental hurdle as well. So yeah, it's having a culturally competent, empathetic care counselor is super important. So I'm gonna keep going um, tonight from that. So my bias today though is like, so I'm just gonna start with this. I'm jumping in as if I haven't already. But my bias is that healing and mental health is so important for everyone, including black men. And I think why, and not to invalidate all the points that we raised in some of the video, it's kind of to add on to that. Like I just wanted to begin with this definition of mental health, because I think when we talk about it, it's a cliche conversation. It's a misnomer. It's rooted in maybe not so helpful language if you're not really practicing it every day, or if you're not living in some of like the criteria that may bring up what maybe like some of the disorders or illnesses or psychological issues may bring. But I think as a baseline, mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, that we can cope with the normal stresses of life, meaning that stresses do come, but the normal stresses of life, we're able to cope with them. We can work productively, and we're able to make a contribution on our community. And I hope this is kind of can be a seeded approach to kind of begin rewiring, because for me, it's helpful to understand it as a baseline. Because as most of the time we think about like the mental health disorders, as I was just saying. So I was trying to just give us like that. This is what I think this is the World Health Organization sort of giving us like this idea of what mental health and this state of well-being really could look like. And even like according to the CDC, mental health includes our and this is not just for men, this is for everyone, our emotional, our psychological, our social well-being. And it affects how, and this is where I love to practice CBT, it affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act, right? So, for example, if we look at just moments in our lives that weren't so great, and really just take a moment to reflect on, I call these doing like mini thought journals or thought records, right? As homework assignments. If we think about, okay, what were we thinking in those moments? How were we feeling in those moments? How do we behave? How do we act, right? I think we can begin to see not only how other people showed up in their interaction or engagement, but also, of course, ourselves. And so again, so when we think about mental health, it's not just like the psychological disorders, it's really just how we processing things emotionally, psychologically, and socially, and how that impacts well-being. It even determines how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and are able to make healthy choices. And the piece I wanted to add about mental health that, just add into this conversation is that we should be thinking about mental health at pretty much every stage of our life, from childhood, from adolescence, and adulthood. And I'm beginning with this conversation and these definitions as like a grounding place, particularly because like in a perfect world, let's say, everyone is healed, everyone is whole, everyone is, doing their thing. In a perfect world, then I think we can really shift the discussion from just, okay, you don't have a mental health issue, to really, how can we focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness, right? Because there's not just mental health that we should be concerned about. There is our whole selves, which includes our emotions, physical, occupational, intellectual, financial, social, spiritual, environmental. All those make up our parts. And when we think about mental health, we kind of get bogged down in this one conversation. And so again, today, it's more of a blended conversation, because I really want to help us. I want to help offer hope. And encourage hope, but really places where we can kind of rewire around the conversations around mental health that can begin to open up pathways for receptibility and conversations within our own community, within our own families, within our own circles. So, just really quick, it's no secret that Black men face a unique set of circumstances in our world when it comes to economic, healthcare, educational disparities. I'm not leaving out the women, but I want to just focus this on men just really, really fast, and as well as systemic racism and social injustices that happen. And I think if I think about men, these then create a world in which we as Black men, we feel like society maybe don't value our lives, or that we are then left to be alone in our thoughts, and then alone in our feelings, right? I think this has resulted in Black men being less likely to seek treatment for mental health services. And then, of course, I think someone said on the chat, when we do, it's inadequate care. So this has the consequence of this, though. It looks like, suicide being the third leading cause of death for Black men ages 15 to 24. And then in 2018, and just for men in general, the suicide rate for Black and African American men was 4 times greater than that for African American women. And not to sort of discredit, but just to sort of like hone in on the importance of it for men in this hour. So just wanted to give us that picture so we can kind of know that it's a serious conversation, and we want to act now and act together, and work together to sort of work through this conversation. I want to jump into sort of reducing the stigma around mental health, and I'm curious. You all can put in the chat. I'm curious to know, especially if you all feel like you have tried things or been working through things or working on things, either as a group, as an individual, as a family, or in your work. How do we reduce stigma surrounding mental health? You can put your comment in the chat. How do you think we can reduce the stigma around mental health? How do you think we can reduce the stigma surrounding mental health? What comes up for you? Okay, be open about seeking therapy. It should not be a secret. I'll say, that comes with some tolerance. I think about the window of tolerance and the people, if you're able and willing to sort of, be that open. And I think I would just add to that, it depends on who you're wanting us to be open about that with, right? Because maybe if this, aunt or mother or wife or spouse or friend, or I think I would be mindful of the community that I'm open about it with. But of course, the more we role model, then the more we're able to expose the right people, and maybe if you have your father or uncle, maybe to younger people as well, or even to like your friend. I mean, so it doesn't have to be family related, but I love to be open. I'm gonna say as much as I possibly can, but yeah, of course. It's important to check in with loved ones. Yes, I think checking in is very important, and I think in the check-in process, I was talking to a client who is a problem solver even this morning, and the checking in is very important and it's very real. I want to just add that we don't always have to fix everything. I think it's one thing to check in, and it's another thing to fix. I think checking in, being present, being non-judgmental, and being empathetic, walking in their shoes mentally and emotionally, that's important. I think so I love checking in. Yeah, share experiences. I love that. If I go biblical, we've overcome by our testimonies. That's how we grow. It's how we learn. That's how we move beyond some things. Openly sharing your own journey within minutes. I love that. I love Madam President. Support others in need of therapy. I say talking about it, but if that was easy, we would just not have the issue. Yes, of course. You be the one to bring it up if you see or have concerns. If you see something, say something. Absolutely. I'll just read 1 or 2 more. I love this. Keep the lines of communication open. Yes, don't just call people on Easter or Christmas. Check on them routinely, more regularly. Yes. Welcome to Topic Conversations. Stepping outside your own comfort zone as much as you're able to. Yes, I love those. Yes, keep the chat going. I'm gonna keep going. Those are great ways. I think I am in agreement with all of those, honestly. And as I was thinking about answers, sorry, I'm not sure what that noise was. as I was thinking about answering that question, where the stigma comes from, I was reading this this study. It's called "The Souls of Black Men," where they documented the true reasons why Black men don't go to counseling, which perpetuates the stigma. And this study, as you see on here, they essentially invited a group of African American men to share their thoughts and experiences with regard to mental health. And on the bottom left corner, what came up for them is we're not supposed to seek help for our mental illnesses. That's what they've been internalized and then living out. There is a lot of stereotyping of Black men in the medical profession. We all have a problem asking for help from those who we think are the reasons for our mental illnesses. We're responsible for mental health, but we need help and support. Going back to the stereotyping of all Black men in all of the medical professions, I just remember, there's this mistrust that came upon us. I'm going to mention this again in a second, but it dates back to even as slaves, right? They tried to label us with drapetomania, right? Because we were wanting to run away. So that's even like that's really interesting that's a thing. Remember the Tuskegee syphilis study, right? And so there's reasons for this mistrust that came up. So it didn't just start overnight, right? And I think the last thing that I'm seeing on this document is no man in America, no Black man, excuse me, is ever mentally healthy. And then who really gives a damn about the Black men in America? Those are all thoughts that Black men came to the study and shared as the reasons why they feel like it wasn't in their favor to seek support. And I think on the right-hand side, just when you think about kind of what happens, in finding the care, let's say you get into the room, you start working with someone. Here's what they said. After they told me in their way that I had a mental health disorder, after one session and after only one conversation, I never went back. They didn't care, neither did I. So they were left with feelings of, hopelessness, no support, and no mindfulness, and no cultural sensitivity. And then another person said, if they don't try to understand you and to step in your shoes, they can never get the diagnosis right. They felt rejected. They felt unworthy of the support and help. And so those are from the voices of Black men. And I just wanted to raise those so we can all know not what we're up against, but kind of just normalize and echo and bring to this conversation to make real like the voices that you're hearing. So when we're trying to work with and work through some of this, it's coming from a place of real experience and real voices from us as Black men. Again, where did the stigma come from? If I was to go through this, the stigma of mental health, isn't new, at least to me in the Black community. Like the root of mental health stigma among Black people can, in my opinion, be traced back to slavery. And I think it's hard not to make this a history lesson, but I think it's helpful to share some context, right? And I'm going to challenge us to reduce the stigma, but I kind of want to first set some context. I think as a millennial, I should say, my mind goes back to even Martin Luther King, who reportedly had severe depression during periods of his life and refused psychiatric treatment, and when urged to seek care by his staff. So, but then that fast forward, right? From historic misconceptions, we learn to really ignore mental illness or even call it other terms like, okay, I'm just stressed out, right? Or I'm too tired, overwhelmed. I think such of these descriptions, in my opinion, for depression and other mental illnesses that we adopt as a Black community, then they're thus passed on from generation to generation. And then that led to underestimating some of the effects and the ultimate impact that we have sort of missed when it comes to our mental health conditions. And ultimately, which everything is sort of like this because of this, it strengthened the beliefs, right, that a psychiatric disorder is a personal weakness. And I think that's where I kind of wanted to kind of walk through that lineage. And I think I read an article that said that all of those factors then, not just one of them, created a culture and it perpetuated the culture amongst us that it's fearful around mental health, the subject in and of itself, missing the definition that I sort of led with, and then us then remaining uninformed about mental illness in general. I started this conversation from Trevor Noah. I think I was just hearing that, we just have a stigma. Okay. I'll keep going, and I want to get to some questions. But mainly, just the stigma is still perpetuated, mainly because we know there's a mental health impact on racism. There's still barriers to treatment. We have to break that down. Our family, our friends, our small circles can perpetuate that access, payment, the lack of Black therapists. We can go on and on, but I'll keep going for the sake of time. I wanted to get to this slide, particularly because, as we discussed, there is just this generational stronghold of stigma that exists. And I think this affects men living and suffering in silence, right? So on the heels of Twitch, which came out, for me, it was evident that we needed a space to heal. I'm gonna pause real quick because there's like a machine that's breaking up. Give me 10 seconds. Sorry, I'm human, and I think that noise was messing with everyone's vibe on here. All right, so just to say on here, the stigma and judgment prevent, Black men from seeking treatment. We know that, and I also want to introduce I guess, just really quick. I want to introduce some thoughts that I was having. Went to a presentation I was reading on the 5 evils of society. And this was a presentation that Maggie McCleary did. And I won't go through them like I want to, but if you have time, just think about and reflect on some of the 5 evils of society that may perpetuate our scripts that we enact or live out, that we internalize that then become scripts. So just think about these things. Colonialism is a evil of society. White supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, and Puritanism is also one of those. And I was going to go through each of those. I know we're short on time, but I was going to go through them and say, no wonder, right? Well, we have then a collective increase of anxiety and depression, and I think we either and while we may even perpetuate this unresolved shame or this idea that we have to dominate over the weak or just continue to live out and act on this grind culture that capitalism brings. And I think it's important because, men in general, definitely as Black men, we carry so much. I also believe we may be carrying our families the responsibility to grind or hustle or make money. We got to perform on the job. We got to perform at home. We got to perform up to society's expectations. We have to be strong men, right? But sometimes for all the wrong reason. And I think, the history of marginalization and oppression, we just need spaces where we can sort of sort through some of these messages of maybe traditional masculinity, right? And their intersectionality of our racial identity as Black men. The traditional, male gender identified identity may encourage us to be aggressive, to be emotionalist, to be strong, to be independent, even dominant. I think we're often compelled to have to even prove our masculinity, even if it boils down to some us doing and dabbling in some risky behaviors. And so I think those are all present. So the rest are kind of on the screen. I kind of put these faces in there. They don't really connect to the things that the messages say, but it just I just wanted to have a reminder slide on here to say, through all of the experiences that we have, Black men, we have a range of emotions, but we tend to stick to just anger, just sad, right? Or maybe even happy sometimes. It's not always just bad. But I think there are other underlying emotions and experiences that we have to really begin to call out and speak about. I want to ask this question. I was going to ask, how do you think we can encourage self-care for Black men? But to go through some of these really quick, and I'll open up for questions. First, of course, self-care is the best care. I think how we get there, how we get to this idea, and we can all sing kumbaya on that one message, is we can, just begin to promote Black mental health and wellness and just be okay with that. But first, we have to accept that it's okay to not be okay. And I think we do a very good job of wearing the t-shirt about that, but I think we have to embody that a little bit more. And that's really why I put it on the slide. So at the heart of saying that, are we really able to listen? Are we really able to not judge one another and our men? Are we really able to be truly empathetic? Are we really willing to rewire some of our own stubbornness, men and women, about how the other person may or may not be showing up just yet, because they may not have the tools to do that. And again, if you are telling someone that it's okay to not be okay, then it usually means that they're not okay. So then, can you accept their okayness? I mean, their not okayness, if that makes sense. And I think second, we have to learn to listen to the stewardess on the flights. Well, we have to learn how to put on our own mask first. And I think, hear this from a Black man, like for the men and women, be comfortable, be courageous enough to get your own therapy to address some of our own wounds that we may have. But we all should be focusing on putting on our own mask and what that may look like for each of us individually. And this is a good place to interject that for women, you may feel like you're constantly the one encouraging the men in your life to seek additional support. And I first would just say, thank you, right? Thank you. Don't give up hope on that. But, sometimes not, but, and in a patriarchal, maybe white supremacist society, I mean, maybe women can sort of sometimes overcompensate for the good to help men. But I think that may show up, though, right? If you think about it, as nagging, as complaining, etc. And so I just want to just build the courage on the part of the women to really create whatever boundary could be helpful for you. But for men, I read this book, Unmasking the Lone Ranger. I want to challenge us to really build maybe covenant relationships. This author talks about how he mentioned a friend and how they built this respectability where they can sort of keep each other accountable, demonstrate concern for one another, disclose certain things, and that kind of built their growing together. I'll keep moving though, because I think thirdly, building the daily activities that can have a positive impact on your own mental health as men is super important. We do well at taking care of others, helping out grandmas, helping out aunts, helping out wives, helping out girlfriends, but also don't forget your own mental health as well. Physical health, since sometimes physical health and mental health are sort of connected. I think that's important. Sleep, eating healthy, connecting with others is important if you can. We forget about these things like practicing mindfulness, meditation, and relaxing techniques. Those help you in tense moments. And then taking a break from negative information. Two more things, and I'm gonna wrap up to see if we have any questions. I pulled out this mental health continuum a while ago. And if you look at this mental health continuum, the thing I would do, I'm put the link in the chat if you want to do an online version. You can do a self-check to see how you feel, maybe for the next 30 days, right? Think of yourself as an iPhone battery, right? When our iPhones are on low, we are charging it up. It's on do not disturb, it's on low battery mode, right? So think about, how you're feeling, your mental health. Are you excelling? Are you thriving? Are you surviving, right? Which I hear that a lot from us. I'm just surviving out here in these streets. Are you struggling? Are you in crisis? These are some of the indicators that you might be mindful of. These are just not an exhaustive list. And actually, if you go to the one online, it's a more of an online version of that. It can kind of give you a real life look at an in the moment look, point in time look at how you're feeling. And again, wherever you land on the continuum, as a counselor, I would say it's not wrong. It's not bad, good or bad. It's just information. So even if you're struggling or in crisis, of course, I'm going to encourage you to come seek some professional support. But even if you're like just surviving or thriving or excelling and kind of want to even build or capitalize on that, I still would say, check in and just have that information for you for the next 30 days as a challenge. But again, this mental health continuum is a good first step for all of us, and especially as men, to take a screenshot of and maybe use this as like a gauge each day, each morning to try to check in with yourself. Because if you can have data about yourself, then that's going to be super informative about how you may again think, behave, and act, right? And then the last thought that I had was I wanted some practical things, because I feel like it's super important. And take what you need. Don't use what you don't like. But just to say, journaling, turning off the phone, getting lost in music sometimes, going for a walk, going for a run or workout. I put on here, taking a bubble bath. I'm going to therapy and meditating, but going back to the bubble bath, actually, these examples of practical things came from an article that Ebony Magazine did, where they also asked Black men, what is the best self-care? What are some practical things that you can do to decompress or protect your mental health? And even taking a bubble bath was one of them. So listen, get you some nice music and some candles. 2 men, we deserve it. And I think that is also part of your own self-care that's super, super duper important. The last slide I was going to say, and I'll take questions, is, just if you need any resources at all, this is where I do an altar call, right? If I want to share some resources, 988 is a place to go. It's super helpful if you need to sort of just check in if you're having a crisis. Seek counseling. There is a link on my website, counselingforus.org, where I just have a list of Black male therapists in the Austin area. It's not a full list just yet. I'm working on meeting and introducing myself to all the other Black male counselors in Austin. So if you know them, just send them to me. But that is definitely a one-stop shop. I did do a journal called Heal to Lead, a 21-day journal for Black men. That's on Amazon. And it just sort of walks you through a HEAL acronym that I use to sort of process using I just HEAL acronym essentially for 21 days. And then, I would encourage everyone on the call, if you haven't done so already, to do a mental health first aid training, essentially. If you so we could all kind of, like we do for CPR and first aid, this is for mental health as well. So I know that I ran through that. Are there any questions or thoughts that we can think about in our final minutes on this on the webinar? And I'll stop sharing too. Questions or comments, maybe. What are your thoughts about twos therapy? What is twos therapy? Oh, telehealth therapy. Yeah. So half of my private practice is telehealth. I mean, I think obviously in COVID, we all have to shift to that. And so we just sort of have to pick up with the pieces and go with it. I believe, I think it's a preference thing. I think, I love in person. I can kind of get more of the rapport and get all of the body language and how someone's showing up. But I can also get that as well virtually. And most of my practice started telehealth. I think I recently sort of came in person. So I appreciate it. I think it's just a preference thing. I mean, if you can, either if you want like a male or female therapist, a particular race therapist, or in-person telehealth, I think it's just based on how you feel, what you feel like you need in the moment. I have couples who've done telehealth, couples who've been in person. It's just a matter of kind of how you feel. How do you feel about the current movement of Black men talking about mental health in the music? I love it. The funny thing I love about that is I have a client, I won't even get to all the details, but I love it because it just shows that one, it makes other Black men feel heard and feel seen, and that and in a place where we don't get to always talk about mental health and it's not always received, and excited to go partake in. And I think obviously other musicians sort of using their platform sort of make light of this or create awareness of this is very important. And I think I've seen even some Black men, one or two that I've seen actually sort of lean on, this rapper went to counseling and mentioned counseling. And so it kind of just opens up sort of neural pathways. I'll say that again, as sort of wanting to receive it and sort of like just creates this reduction of the stigma. How many times should we attend therapy in order for it to be effective? Once a week or once a month? Yes, is the answer to that. I think it's going to depend on one, kind of maybe the need, of course. It's going to depend on like the severity of the need, how much work you're able to do in the session, how much you may sort of do outside of the session. It's not a one size fits all. Some models sort of give like a 10 to 15 approach. But I have a client who I've seen for a long time, for about a year. And so it just depends. I mean, I think even for me, I think I was in counseling, I'll say, okay, I'm going to be your best client. It's going to be very easy to sit back and chill. But when I began opening my mouth and talking about my own story, there were pieces of my puzzle that had not been put together just yet, right? And it's still being put together. And so I don't think there's a time limit. It's not time bound, but I think you can set treatment goals with your particular therapist, and they can work with you on goals. And if you feel like you're meeting them and able to maintain, then great. If you want to keep going, all the more the better. Mental health first aid training. You can just go to a Mental Health First Aid America, and that is definitely a good place to kind of have a list of trainings in your local area. So I think that was all the questions. I know I talked fast, but I know we're running out of time.
I think you covered them all. I think the last one was thoughts about all the new Find a Therapist apps that are popping up on your social networking sites. That would probably be the last question.
I think, take advantage of whatever you feel like is feasible and doable and useful. I think I would go into it with sort of, if you feel like you need to use that particular service or a service to sort of find a therapist, and go for it. I'm not going to hold anyone back from any goals, either the creator or the seeker. There are ways like Psychology Today, you can filter, by, hey, I want a Black female in Austin, and a list of them should come up. I mean, or even on my Instagram, I post like Black male therapist in Austin. I don't have anything negative to say about finding a therapist. I think it's just a matter of however you feel like you want to reach support and help. I'm going to always encourage you to get it. But as long as there are free options. I don't know what Find a Therapist does, but as long as you feel like you're getting the best bang for your buck and it's sort of get you to the support that you need, I would say go for it.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for guiding us through this conversation this evening. We appreciate all of your transparency and your willingness to be vulnerable and be open as we discuss the importance of Black mental health. But specifically, we want to focus on what we can do to support them. And as Kevin states, like how we can support our Black men from being healed to lead. At this time, I definitely want to pause and acknowledge our president of the Austin Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, SORA President Robin Blackman.
Thank you, Sora Briscoe. And this has been very informative. You all don't know this, but Kevin and I work together, so I see him on the halls at work. So I'm so excited to see him moving into this space. And thank you for sharing your heart with us, Kevin. This is very important. I have a son, and he does counseling. And so, I think we as Black women, we were kind of raised in this strong era to just deal with things. And so as a Black mother of a Black son, it was hard for me to even grasp, kind of what I heard being said earlier, like, you don't need counseling or whatever, but I had to kind of open my mind. So I think this was great for us to kind of understand that in our culture, there's been this stigma, and that even as a parent, I have to kind of change the way I think and how I parent my kids and how I allow them to have that mental space. Mine includes, I like the soaking in the tub. I'm a beach girl, so you didn't bring up the beach, but if I can go to the beach at any time. But I think I have to learn sometimes to just take that space. So I was looking at the spectrum that you provided. So this was great information to our sorors and guests who are on. I hope that this has been helpful for you. And I hope this is not the last time that we engage, whether it's a conversation or moving to the next level. How do we work together to do some different things and change the mental health of our community? That is one of Delta's priorities. Mental health, women, girls, and helping us understand that stigma. So I want to thank my co-chairs, Sarah Fleming and Sarah Briscoe, and the Physical and Mental Health Committee for putting this on, and we look forward to other opportunities. Are there any questions for me? None. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good night.
Kevin, will we be able to share your resources with everyone?
Yes, I'll give you a small little postcard thing to send out if we can to those who registered.
Perfect. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate you. Please do not let your healing stop here. Continue the conversation and we continue to go forward. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.